Pardon the interruption. I'm Mike Wilbon in Washington. Frank Isola sitting in for Tony Kornheiser in New York. Frank, we're going to go right to some news from a conference you and I are both familiar with, the Big Ten. We're going to start with significant news about the upcoming college football season. The Big Ten decided today that if the conference can play football, it will move to conference-only schedules. The thinking is that a 10-game conference-only football season would eliminate some long-distance travel, and ensure better virus testing. Frank, you're a father of the Big Ten very recently. Do you think the chances for football in the Big Ten this year got better or worse? And more importantly, in some ways, what does this mean for college football as a whole going forward?
Well, you're right, Mike. Yesterday the Ivy League announced no fall sports, no sports until January 1st. They're hoping to play football in the spring. The Pac-12 and the ACC are expected to follow the same plan that the Big Ten has. We know what college football means to the sporting consumer in this country. We know what college football means to these college campuses and towns. To me, they're just delaying the inevitable. It's almost like they know it's going to be very difficult to pull off a season. The Big Ten even said that, Michael, in the statement that they released. So I think just confining it to conference opponents, I think it was a smart thing to do. Now, we don't know if that means the season is starting in September, because that's usually when you play non-conference opponents. Or are they thinking, let's push it back a little bit, buy ourselves some time? But let's be honest, Mike, it doesn't look good for college football.
No, Frank, it doesn't. And some of this, it gives the conference, or at least they thought this as they were deciding it, some flexibility in a lot of areas. I mean, we mentioned travel at the top right there. Also testing, where you can have some uniformity,
right,
where you can control it. You can't control it when it's outside of the conference, and in other conferences, schools don't want to particularly go along with what you have suggested. The Big Ten sort of eliminates that issue, with travel being the big one. But Frank, I think you're right in terms of delaying, finding out what you can do. What sticks in my mind is that number, $4 billion. That is not costing, but that the Power 5 conferences are losing if they don't have football. Now, there's some alternatives out there. We've heard the talk of a possible spring season if you move it all the way out of the fall.
Yep.
And maybe, Frank, that's the next step. But these are steps. These are it's delaying something. It's giving them more time. By the way, if you only have the 10-game conference schedule season, you leave yourself some weeks to push the season or skip if you have testing issues, if you have God knows what nationally, and you can't just forge ahead with football as scheduled. So this, to me, is a common sense approach. It is sort of acknowledging whatever. Look, it's inevitable that we have to deal with this as an issue, whether it's postponed, canceled, delayed, interrupted, abbreviated, whatever it is. The Big Ten is acknowledging that, and it seems like, as you mentioned, some other conferences, big conferences, are sure to follow.
Now, here's the thing, Mike. Some of the non-conference games, Michigan was going to travel to Washington. Ohio State was going to travel to Oregon. You had Notre Dame was going to play Wisconsin at Lambeau. Those are some big games. We could also mention Maryland was going to play Towson, and your Northwestern Wildcats were going to play Tulane and Morgan State. But here's my thing, Mike. You mentioned these conferences, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, ACC. What about the SEC? What do you think they're going to do? Because to me, I think it's like they view it differently, even though those schools are more right now in the hotbed of the coronavirus as opposed to the Big Ten schools, right?
I think they're just gonna look at themselves differently, and they are going to govern themselves without any regard, particularly for what another conference is doing, to a point. And you wonder to what point. I mean, the television networks, including this one, get involved in that discussion. Maybe they don't. Maybe they wait for the schools and the conferences to make the big decisions first. But we're not done with this, Frank. And to me, college football and pro football have been proceeding as if, that's an issue for basketball and the NHL and Major League Baseball. That's for those people. We're done with that here. No, you're just starting with that.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.